The overnight bus from the north end of the city dropped me at the corner of Veltran and Marsh at 6:47 a.m., the same corner it had dropped me every weekday for 11 months. The shelter there had a broken panel on the east side, which meant the February wind came through at an angle and caught the back of my neck no matter how I stood. I knew this. I had stopped fighting it months ago. I was 24 years old and I knew the exact angle of wind through a broken bus shelter. That felt like a summary of something I hadn't chosen. The walk to Veltran Pharma District 9 took 6 minutes on a flat day, 8 when ice had formed overnight on the stretch of sidewalk in front of the insurance office that the building's super never salted in time. February meant ice days outnumbered flat ones. 8 minutes, careful steps, the canvas bag with my lunch and change of non-slip shoes knocking against my hip in steady rhythm. The pharmacy opened at 8. I arrived at 7:15, which was not required and not paid. Dr. Escara preferred the dispensing counter reorganized before the first patient queue. Labels aligned, Schedule 2 cabinet re-logged from the overnight duty sheet, the returned prescription bin cleared and documented. It was just the gap between what the job said it needed and what it actually needed to function. And I had spent 11 months learning to live in that gap without drawing attention to it. My name is Natalia Ferris. I fill prescriptions, process patient intake, log controlled substance inventory twice per shift, and know by face every regular who arrives before 9 a.m. Mrs. Calloway for her metformin, the man with the gray scarf for his blood pressure combination, the young mother who picked up her son's Ritalin every Tuesday and counted the tablets through the bag before she reached the door, which I never blamed her for. I had learned their rhythms before I had learned my supervisor's last name. I was good at this job. No one in the building said so out loud except Dr. Escara, who had said it once, quietly, and without looking up from the dispensing log. The way important things get said in places where volume is discouraged. Outside the pharmacy, the math did not cooperate. Tomas had been on the neurosurgical waiting list since October. The motorcycle accident left him with a spinal compression at L3-L4. 3 months of conservative treatment and 2 specialist opinions leading to a final consultation with Dr. Reinhold at the University Hospital that removed all remaining interpretation, surgery within the next 2 months, or progressive and irreversible loss of function in both legs. The surgical slot required a deposit. $14,800 to hold the date while insurance processed the procedure claim. Insurance would cover the surgery itself once confirmed. The deposit was the problem. Clean, specific, and $3,200 beyond what we currently had with 6 weeks remaining before the slot closed and passed to the next name on the list. Our mother ran a morning cleaning shift at the downtown hotel and a half shift at a dry cleaning counter on Fridays. Between us, across 2 jobs and 1 overtime application still pending, we were gaining ground slowly. The way ground is gained when every dollar you earn already belongs to something else before it arrives. I was selling things. Textbooks. A camera from high school. A winter coat I liked but did not need as badly as Tomas needed that slot to stay open. I had not told him the exact number. He was 19 and already ashamed of the accident, ashamed of the waiting list, ashamed of needing anything at all. The number would have made it worse. The ice patch in front of the insurance office stretched the full width of the sidewalk, pale, nearly invisible under gray pre-dawn light. I stepped around it through the frosted grass at the curb, bag swinging, breath clouding in the cold air. The pharmacy's loading dock 2 blocks ahead with a delivery truck already idling in the orange wash of the streetlights. I put my head down into the wind and walked. Tuesday, February 4th, 7:21 a.m. The returned prescription bin had 3 items in it. That was normal. I cleared them, cross-referenced against the overnight duty sheet, initialed each return in the log the way Dr. Escara had shown me on day 3 of the job. Date, time, pharmacist on duty, reason code. Standard. The Schedule 2 cabinet relog was less standard this morning. I pulled the overnight tally sheet and set it beside the physical count the way I always did. Numbers on paper against numbers in the real world. A habit I had developed not because anyone asked me to, but because inventory discrepancies during my shift meant my initials were on the line that mattered. I counted the oxycodone, the fentanyl patches, the methylphenidate. Set each tray back. Counted again. The fentanyl column was off by 9 units. I stood with the tray in both hands and looked at the overnight duty sheet for a full 30 seconds. The log showed 32 patches dispensed between 6 p.m. and closing. The physical count showed 23 remaining against an opening count of 61. 38 gone. 6 unaccounted for beyond the log entries, but the overnight sheet showed 32 dispensed and 2 returned, which should have left 31 remaining at minimum, 9 units short. The tray went back in the cabinet. I locked it and looked at the dispensing log, the full book, not just the overnight sheet, going back to Friday. My initials were on 3 entries I did not remember making, not my handwriting. Close. The N looped the same way mine does. The F of Ferris compressed the same way mine compresses. But the pressure was different, the ink slightly different weight, and the timestamps were 6:43 p.m., 6:51 p.m., and 7:02 p.m. last Thursday, which was the evening Dr. Escara left early for his daughter's school recital, and I was the only staff member on the floor. Only I had not been there at 6:43. I had been in the back storeroom logging the Tuesday delivery until 7:15, which the storeroom entry badge recorded automatically and which I could pull from the building's access panel in 20 seconds. Someone had used the dispensing counter while I was in the back. Someone with access to the Schedule II cabinet keys. Someone who had watched me closely enough to approximate my initials in a controlled substance log. I did not close the book. I stood at the counter with the log open in front of me and thought about the $14,800 in Tomas's surgical slot and the exact number of weeks remaining, and I understood clearly that the shape of what I was looking at was not a clerical error. It was a frame. I photographed both pages with my phone before I moved anything. Timestamp 7:26 a.m., both columns clearly visible, the 3 forged initial entries centered in the frame. Then I photographed the tray count against the log sheet. Then I wrote the discrepancy in my own hand on a fresh sheet of paper, signed and dated it, and folded it into my canvas bag beside my lunch. Proof Item 1. By the time Dr. Escara arrived at 7:55, I had the counter reorganized and the patient queue forms stacked. He took his coat off, scanned the dispensing log the way he always did first thing, and stopped at the same 3 entries I had stopped at. His finger traced the initials. "Natalia," he said, without accusation. A question instead. "Those aren't mine," I said. "The timestamps place me in the storeroom. Building access will confirm." He looked at me over the log. His face did the calculation. 11 months of early arrivals, reorganized counters, inventory caught before it became crisis, against 3 initialed entries in ink that wasn't quite mine. "Who has cabinet access besides you and me?" I asked. He closed the log slowly. "District supervisors have master override keys." "When was the last district inspection?" He looked at the wall where the inspection schedule was taped. A habit, not a need. He had it memorized. "Silas Devrek, Thursday, late walkthrough, 6:30. The name landed like the February cold through the broken shelter panel. Not a shock, a confirmation. "He would have been here alone," I said. "After your recital." Dr. Escara's jaw set. "I'll call district this morning." "Don't," I said quietly. "Not yet. Not until we know what we're calling about." He looked at me for a long moment, really looked, the way he rarely did during the operational rhythm of the day, and then gave a single careful nod. The first patient arrived at 8 on the dot, Mrs. Calloway with her metformin refill, umbrella dripping from sleet that had started without warning. I processed her script, counted her tablets, smiled the way I always smiled, and thought about master override keys and a man named Silas Devrek, who had stood at my counter alone on a Thursday evening while I logged delivery crates 12 feet away behind a closed storeroom door. I knew Devrek by scheduled appearance only. He came to District 9 on the 3rd Thursday of every month. Compliance walkthrough, inventory spot check, a brief review with Dr. Escara that always ran exactly 22 minutes, because Devrek tracked everything by efficiency, and efficiency meant never exceeding his own benchmarks. He was 41, angular build, the kind of careful grooming that read as authority in a district office, but read as effort in a pharmacy dispensing room. He had never spoken to me directly except to ask where Iskara kept the incident report binders, which I showed him without commentary. What I knew about him beyond the scheduled appearances came from small accumulations, the kind of knowledge that builds when you are invisible and present at the same time. I knew his district car was a gray Veltran fleet sedan, plate ending in 447, always parked in the loading zone 10 minutes before his arrival, and gone within 5 minutes of his departure. I knew he carried a separate key ring from his main lanyard, a smaller ring, 2 keys, clipped inside his jacket pocket rather than on his belt, which I had noticed when he reached across the dispensing counter to point at an entry in the binder 14 months ago. At the time, I filed the observation away without purpose. Now it had a shape. I knew his access logs would show every entry and exit through the district's badge system. And I knew that if those logs had been altered, if Devrek was careful enough to forge initials, he might be careful enough to scrub his own entry timestamp. Then the only thing that might survive was the building's independent CCTV system, which was not managed by Veltran District Office, but by the property management company that held the lease on the building itself. I knew this because in September, a pipe fitting had failed in the storeroom ceiling, and the property management company had sent a crew with access to every corridor camera, while the district office had sent a compliance report that arrived 3 weeks later. 2 separate systems, 2 separate chains of custody. I spent my first break at 10:15 in the storeroom, not sitting. I pulled the badge access record from the wall panel, a physical printout the system generated automatically every 48 hours, kept in a plastic sleeve beside the fire procedure card. I found Thursday evening, my entry at 6:17 p.m., my exit at 7:19 p.m. No other badge entries logged for the storeroom, but the dispensing counter cabinet didn't require a badge. It required a key, master override key, the kind that left no electronic record in the district's system. Only a physical mark if you knew what to look for. I looked at the cabinet lock under the counter-level light I used for label checks. A small scratch on the lower left edge of the keyhole housing, fresh enough that the metal hadn't oxidized yet. The pharmacy's key was older, worn smooth, would not produce a scratch like that. A master override key, larger and less used, inserted by someone who didn't know the exact angle of entry the way the daily users did. I photographed the scratch. Photograph 2, timestamped 10:23 a.m., proof item 2. At 11:40, Silas Devrek walked through the front door, not scheduled. Third Thursday was still 9 days out. He came in wearing his district lanyard and the careful grooming and the expression of a man performing a routine task. Clipboard, smile calibrated to just above neutral, eyes on the dispensing counter before they were on the room. "Miss Ferris?" he said. Not a question. An arrival. "Mr. Devrek." Even. "Doctor, Iskara is with a patient." "I'll wait." He set the clipboard on the end of the dispensing counter and turned slightly, not away from me, not toward me. The angle of a man who wanted to appear casual and had thought about what casual required. "I'm doing a spot inventory on Schedule 2 across the district. Compliance audit, random cycle." "Of course," I said. "I can pull the current log when you're ready." "No need." His eyes went to the cabinet. "Doctor, Iskara handles the final sign-off. I'll wait." It was the wrong answer. Compliance spot inventories required the dispensing staff to pull the log and initiate the count, protocol that Devrek had enforced himself during 2 previous visits, citing Section 7.4 of the district manual with the precision of a man who had written the enforcement memo. He wasn't here for a spot inventory. He was here to see what I knew. I kept my expression even. The face I wore for patients counting tablets through the bag, for the man with the gray scarf when his blood pressure combination was delayed by an insurance query, for every moment that required calm as a professional function rather than an emotional one. I processed 2 prescription refills while he waited, labeled correctly, filed correctly, smiled at Mrs. Calloway's neighbor who came in for the first time, and needed the immunization schedule explained. At 12:06, Dr. Escara appeared from the patient corridor and stopped a half-step short when he saw Devrek at the counter, the precise hesitation of a man who had spent the morning recalibrating his understanding of his district supervisor and was now looking directly at the reason he'd needed to. "Silas," he said, recovery smooth. "Unscheduled? Random cycle." Devrek lifted the clipboard. "Should be brief." Dr. Escara's eyes moved to mine for a fraction of a second. A question, a check. I gave the smallest nod. "I have what I need. Hold steady." He led Devrek toward the back office. I stood at the dispensing counter, hands flat on the surface, and listened to the sound of my own breathing. Controlled, professional. The pharmacy's fluorescent hum steady overhead. Outside the front window, the sleet had thickened. Veltran's gray fleet sedan sat in the loading zone with the engine off, plate ending in 447. He had come to gauge the damage. To decide if the forged initials needed to be escalated, another layer planted, more pressure applied, or if they could be left as a slow-burn anchor against me, should the inventory discrepancy surface through official channels. What he did not know was that the building's CCTV was managed by a property company that did not report to him and whose footage I had not yet pulled but fully intended to. I wrote his arrival time, duration, and stated reason in my personal log at 12:09 p.m. Date, time, observed behavior, deviation from protocol. Proof item 3. Devrek left at 12:34 p.m. The spot inventory had produced nothing. Dr. Escara had walked him through the current log with the pages from this morning already set aside in the office drawer, the count on the cabinet reflecting the corrected tally I had re-logged after photographing the discrepancy. Clean surface. Nothing for Devrek to act on without revealing that he knew what to look for. He paused at the dispensing counter on his way out, set one hand flat on the surface the way a man sets a hand on a table when he wants the gesture to read as casual, and it doesn't quite. "Everything looks routine," he said. "It usually does," I said. He held my gaze for 3 seconds, one beat longer than professional neutrality required. And then he walked out through the front door and got into the gray sedan with the engine running before the door swung fully closed behind him. Dr. Escara came out of the back corridor at 12:38. Patient queue cleared for the lunch hour. He stood at the end of the counter and looked at the space where Devrek had been standing. "He was checking your reaction," he said. "Yes." "What did he find?" "Nothing useful to him." I pulled my canvas bag from under the counter and set the folded sheet of paper, my handwritten discrepancy record from this morning, on the dispensing surface between us. "He's been diverting fentanyl through forged staff initials. Mine specifically, because I'm the staff member with the most Schedule II contact and the least institutional protection." Escara read the sheet without touching it. His expression did the thing it did when a dispensing error came in from an outside clinic. A careful, contained gravity that meant he was building a response rather than having a reaction. "How long?" he said. "I don't know yet. The 3 entries I found go back to Thursday. But if it's systematic, I'd need the full log from October forward, when I transferred to full-time. That's when my initials would have become consistent enough to replicate. I can pull that." "Not through the district system," I said. "If Devrek has admin access, he can flag a log pull and know we're looking within the hour. We need the physical binders. Paper only." Escara looked at me with the expression he had used this morning, the full attention look, rare during operational hours. "You've thought about this carefully." "I started thinking about it at 7:26, I said. "I had time." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a delivery van moved through the sleet gray street with its flashers on, slow and careful. The pharmacy's fluorescent hum filled the space between us. "The building cameras," he said. "They're not district. Property management. Verano Holdings." I had looked up the lease placard in the back corridor during my break. "They manage 3 buildings on this block. Their main office is on Veltran at 4th. You want to go today?" I want to go before Devrek calculates that the CCTV is outside his access and moves to have it interfered with. I paused. He's not careless. He came in today unscheduled to assess. When he decides he needs to act, he'll act quickly. Escara pulled the paper log binder from under the counter, the physical backup record that the district system was supposed to mirror, and set it on the surface. "Take your lunch hour," he said. Verano Holdings. Ask for footage from last Thursday between 6 and 7:30 p.m., dispensing corridor camera. Tell them it's a pharmacy compliance matter and you need it preserved pending review. I put my coat on. He was already opening the binder, moving back through the October entries, his finger running down the initial columns with the careful, unhurried focus of a man who understood that what he was about to find would require him to change his understanding of the last several months. "Dr. Escara," I said. He looked up. "Don't call district, not yet. Not until I have the footage." He held my gaze. Natalia. First time he had used my given name since the first week. "Go." Verano Holdings occupied the ground floor of a sandstone building 2 blocks north, a property management office that smelled of coffee and radiator heat, and the particular mustiness of lease files stored in vertical cabinets. The woman at the front desk had the organized patience of someone who handled maintenance calls all day, and therefore treated every visitor as a potential plumbing emergency until proven otherwise. I told her it was a pharmacy compliance matter. I told her I needed footage preserved from last Thursday, dispensing corridor camera, District 9 Veltran Pharma, 6 p.m. to 7:30. I used the word preserved deliberately, a legal weight word, the kind that implied consequence for inaction. She made a phone call. A man in a cable-knit sweater came out from the back. Facilities manager, reading glasses on a lanyard, the unhurried authority of someone who had dealt with compliance requests before and knew exactly which forms they generated. "Chain of custody request?" he said. "Yes." "We can pull and hold the segment. You'll need a formal written request from the pharmacy or a legal notice to release it to a third party, but we can flag it preserved today." "That's all I need right now," I said. He typed something at the desk terminal, clicked twice, looked at the screen. "Thursday, February 6th, 1800 to 1930, dispensing corridor." He clicked again. "Flagged. Preservation hold on the segment. It won't be overwritten in the standard 72-hour rotation." He looked up. "You have 14 days before you need a formal release request to keep it beyond that." Understood. I wrote my name, phone number, and pharmacy address on the form he slid across. Signed at the bottom. He tore off the carbon copy and handed it to me. Pale yellow receipt paper, date stamped 1:09 p.m., preservation hold confirmation number printed at the top. Proof item 4. I walked back through the sleet with the yellow paper folded inside my canvas bag beside the other photographs and the handwritten discrepancy sheet. And I thought about Silas Devrek in his gray fleet sedan calculating timelines. And I thought about $14,800 and a surgical slot closing in 6 weeks. And I thought about the 3 fake initials in the controlled substance log. The N looped almost like mine. The F almost compressed like mine. And the particular coldness of being someone that a man had studied carefully enough to replicate on paper. Invisible. Present. Useful. He had looked at me standing at my dispensing counter for 11 months and seen a frame waiting to be built. I had been looking at him for 11 months and seen a man who parked in the loading zone exactly 10 minutes early, who carried a separate keyring inside his jacket, who signed off spot inventories in exactly 22 minutes, and who had a teenage son in a private rehabilitation facility, whose fees appeared, according to the district office newsletter I had read in the break room in November, to be covered by a Veltran corporate wellness grant that Dr. Escara had quietly mentioned he'd never been asked to countersign. I had filed that away too. Without purpose, at the time. Now it had a shape. I was back at the counter by 1:24 p.m., coat hung, hands washed, the queue forming again at the front door as the lunch hour ended. Mrs. Calloway's neighbor had left a voicemail about the immunization schedule. The man with the gray scarf had come in during my absence and left a note for a callback on his blood pressure combination. I pulled it from the message tray and called him back at 1:31 and explained the insurance processing delay and the expected resolution date and the pharmacy's bridge supply protocol for continued patients. He thanked me, said I was always helpful, said he didn't know what the pharmacy would do without me. I said I appreciated that, and I logged the call, and I set the yellow preservation hold receipt in the back of my canvas bag where it lay flat against the bottom seam, next to the photographs and the discrepancy sheet and the quiet accumulation of everything I had found in a single morning by doing what I had always done, arriving early, counting carefully, and noticing the things that were almost right, but weren't quite. Wednesday, February 5th. Dr. Escarra pulled the paper log binders after closing. All four, October through January, spread across the dispensing counter under the fluorescent work light with the front shutters drawn, and the patient queue sign flipped to closed. It took us 90 minutes. I ran the count while he cross-referenced the district system printout he had pulled from the back terminal, moving backward through the months methodically, column by column. By 8:15 p.m. we had a number. 22 forged entries across 4 months. Always my initials. Always fentanyl patches or high-milligram oxycodone. Always on evenings when Dr. Escarra had left early. His daughter's recital, a dental appointment, a mandatory district webinar he had attended from the parking lot on his phone. Devrek had tracked his schedule, had waited for the windows. He knew your early departures in advance, I said. Escarra looked at the open binders, his hands flat on the counter. The district calendar. Supervisors have read access to all staff scheduling across the district. I enter my own adjustments. 22 entries, each representing units diverted, each with my initials carrying the liability. If an audit had landed, district, state, DEA, the log would have pointed to one person. The dispensing staff with Schedule 2 access and 11 months of consistent initial entries. Me. I photographed all 22 entries across 4 binders, time-stamped. Then I cross-referenced each one against my badge access record from the storeroom wall panel. 12 of the 22 fell during windows when my badge showed me in the storeroom. The remaining 10 were on evenings I had been present at the counter, but working the patient queue, which the dispensing camera, Verano Holdings, already flagged, would have captured. 22 entries. 12 with badge alibi. 10 with camera alibi pending. All of them are defensible, I said. Escarra was quiet for a moment. This isn't a compliance error, he said. The obvious thing, said carefully, the way a man states the obvious when the obvious has weight. No. He's been building this for 4 months. Against you specifically. Against whoever had the most Schedule 2 contact and the least ability to fight back. I set the photographs in order on the counter. I don't think it started as personal. I think it started as convenient. Escarra looked at the photographs. Who do we report this to? District reports to Devrek's office. Regional oversight takes 6 weeks minimum for a preliminary response. The building, I said. Verano Holdings holds the lease, the Commendatore. Escarra looked up. I had heard the name in the break room in pieces, the way names that carry weight circulate in the edges of conversations without ever being placed at the center. Verano Holdings was the property management face, but the actual holding company behind the 3 buildings on this block was registered through a numbered entity that Dr. Escarra had mentioned once, in October, when the pipe fitting failed and the repair crew arrived within 2 hours of the reported leak. The owner takes the building seriously, he had said. He takes most things seriously. And then he had returned to the inventory count without adding anything further. He owns the building, I said. Not Veltran. The pharmacy leases the space from his company, which means Devrek's master override key operates inside a building that doesn't belong to Veltran's district structure. Escarra understood it immediately. The leverage point, the jurisdiction gap. The lease agreement gives Verano Holdings facility access oversight. And the CCTV is already under preservation hold, I said. which means the footage chain of custody runs through his property management office, not through district. Escara was quiet. Outside, the sleet had stopped. The street beyond the shutters held the specific silence of a city that had gone still after weather. No traffic, the occasional distant sound of a plow. "I don't have a contact there," he said, above the facilities manager. "I'll find one," I said. Thursday, February 6th, 9:45 a.m. The Verano Holdings lease placard in the back corridor listed a registered business address and a portfolio management contact number. I called from the pharmacy's back office during the mid-morning lull, Escara at the front counter with the queue. The number connected to a receptionist who confirmed that the portfolio contact for Veltran District properties was handled through a specific office on Caserna Street, the financial district's eastern edge. She transferred me before I could ask a second question. The call rang 4 times and was answered by a woman with a voice like a civil servant. Efficient, not unkind. She said the name of the office. I said I was calling regarding a controlled substance diversion occurring within a leased Verano Holdings property and involving the property's CCTV footage currently under a preservation hold. A pause. Then, "Your name and pharmacy address." I gave both. "Hold, please." I held for 6 minutes. The pharmacy's back office smelled of cardboard and disinfectant, and the particular stillness of a room that held records rather than people. I stood at the small window that looked onto the service alley, watching a maintenance crew replace a salt bin at the alley's corner. The line clicked. A different voice. Male, unhurried, the weight of someone who did not need to signal authority because it was already in the register. Not loud, precise. "Miss Ferris," he said, "tell me what you found. Not what seems to be the problem. Not how can I help. Tell me what you found." I told him. Chronologically, without editorializing. The discrepancy, the forged initials, the scratch on the cabinet lock, Devrek's unscheduled visit, the log audit across 4 months, the 22 entries, the badge records, the preservation hold receipt. 4 minutes. No repetition. When I finished, there was a silence that did not feel like hesitation. It felt like processing. "The physical binders," he said. "Are they at the pharmacy now?" "Yes." "Don't move them. Don't log this conversation in the district system. I'll have someone at the pharmacy at 2 p.m. A pause. "Is Dr. Escara aware of the full scope?" "Yes, he's been present for the log audit." "Good." Another pause. Shorter. "Miss Ferris?" "Yes." "You said Devrek's unscheduled visit was to assess your reaction." "Yes." "What did he find?" "Nothing useful to him," I said. The same words I had said to Dr. Escara, but this time the silence on the other end had a different quality, an attention, focused and still. "Close the binders," he said. "Stack them in order. Leave them on the dispensing counter. My associate will be there at 2. The line disconnected. I stood in the back office for a moment with the phone in my hand. Then I went back to the dispensing counter and processed the 10:15 prescription queue and measured metformin and labeled 3 refill bags and explained the immunization schedule a second time to Mrs. Calloway's neighbor who had come back with a written list of questions, which I answered in order, carefully, all the way to the end. The associate arrived at 1:53 p.m. She was not what I had constructed in the 7 minutes between the phone call and returning to the dispensing counter. I had built someone legal, clipboard, briefcase, the groomed efficiency of a compliance officer. What came through the front door instead was a woman in her mid-30s, dark coat, no visible portfolio, who introduced herself to Dr. Escara simply as Mara, and produced a card that identified her as a senior investigator for Verano Holdings property management without further elaboration. She shook his hand. She shook mine. Her grip was brief and dry and entirely businesslike. She looked at the 4 binders on the counter without touching them. "These are in order?" "October through January," I said. Tabbed at each forged entry. 22 total. She produced a phone from her coat pocket and began photographing each tabbed page systematically, working through the binders with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this precise task before and had decided exactly how to do it correctly. No commentary. No expression of surprise at the forged entries. She simply documented. When she finished the binders, she turned to me. The badge access printout. I handed her the copy I'd made, the storeroom entry records going back to October, 12 alibi windows highlighted in pencil, each corresponding to a forged entry date. She photographed that too. The scratch on the cabinet lock, she said. Show me. I led her behind the dispensing counter and crouched at the cabinet, angling my phone light at the lower left edge of the keyhole housing the way I had that morning. She looked at it for a long moment without touching it. Then she produced a small evidence bag from her coat pocket and an examination light narrower than mine and looked again. Master override key, she said. Not a question. The angle and depth suggest a larger, less used key inserted by someone unfamiliar with the exact entry angle, I said. Our pharmacy key is worn smooth. It self-aligns. This required pressure. She photographed the scratch from 4 angles, bagged a swab from the keyhole surface, and stood. The CCTV preservation hold, she said. You have the receipt number? Yes. I gave her the carbon copy. She called someone from the back office. A short call. The hold number read aloud. A request for same-day internal transfer of the flag segment to a secure folder. When she returned, she handed me back the yellow receipt. Footage is transferred to secure review. Chain of custody runs through Verano Holdings directly. Veltran District cannot access or alter it. Proof item 5. Secured footage. Jurisdiction confirmed. She sat at the back office desk with the binders open and spent 40 minutes building a parallel documentation file on her tablet while I managed the afternoon queue at the front counter. At 3:34, she appeared in the doorway. Devrek filed a routine compliance report on District 9 this morning, she said. Standard cycle paperwork. It cites no irregularities and includes a note commending Dr. Escara's inventory management. She let that land. He's filing a clean record before anyone else can file a dirty one. Covering his exit route, I said. Or his next move. She looked at me steadily. He knows the footage exists. He doesn't know it's been flagged and transferred. He knows the camera is there. It's visible in the corridor. Whether he knows the system runs through Verano rather than District is a different question. He will know by tomorrow, she said. His District access logs will show the preservation hold flag in the Verano system if he runs a cross-check. She closed her tablet. I'm going back to the office. Someone will contact you directly tonight. She left at 3:41. The afternoon queue continued. The gray scarf man had come back for his blood pressure callback in person, which I addressed at the counter while Escara handled a patient consultation in the back. Normal surface. The fluorescent hum and the prescription labels and the patients with their bags and their schedules and their illnesses, managed at a counter that sat on top of 4 months of systematic betrayal. Thursday, February 6th, 7:18 p.m. The call came on my personal cell while I was standing in the kitchen making rice for Tomas, who was eating sitting up now, better than last month, worse than the month before the accident. He had the careful movements of someone who had learned which angles cost him. Miss Ferris. The same voice from this morning. Unhurried. Precise. Yes, I said. I turned the burner down. The footage is confirmed. A pause. Devrek entered the dispensing corridor at 18:31 last Thursday, using the maintenance access door from the service alley, not the front entrance. He was at the Schedule 2 cabinet for 11 minutes. He used the dispensing counter log from 1843 to 1902. He left through the same alley door at 1908. 11 minutes, 3 forged entries. A key ring kept inside his jacket rather than on his belt. The footage chain of custody, I said. Secure. Veltran District cannot touch it. Another pause. I want to see you tomorrow, The pharmacy, 8 a.m. before opening. I'll come to you. The directness of it. Not an office summons, not a request routed through Mara. Coming to the pharmacy. Coming to where the evidence was. I'll be there, I said. Tomas looked up from the table. He had the television on low. A habit since the accident. Background noise filling the silence that had replaced his former constant movement. He watched me end the call with the particular attention of a 19-year-old who noticed more than he let on. Work? He said. A meeting tomorrow. I went back to the rice. Early. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Nat, are you in trouble? I kept my back to him, stirring. The question was the most he had asked about my work since October, when the full-time transfer had come through, and I had told him only that it was a promotion of sorts. More hours, more responsibility, more consistent pay. He had accepted that with the grateful relief of someone who needed the money too much to interrogate its source. Not the kind that lands on me, I said. He was quiet again. I heard him shift in his chair. The careful movement, the calibrated adjustment. 14,008, he said. I turned. He was looking at the table, not at me. I found the printout, he said. From the hospital. In your jacket pocket when I was hanging it up last week. He looked up. That's the deposit number, isn't it? The rice simmered. I turned the burner off. Yes, I said. How far are we? Closer than we were. I brought 2 bowls to the table and sat across from him. Let me handle the meeting tomorrow. Then I'll tell you everything. He looked at the bowl, then at me. He had our mother's eyes, sharp at the edges, the kind that went soft only when he was deciding to trust someone. Okay, he said, and picked up his fork. Friday, February 7th, 7:52 a.m. He was already inside when I arrived. Not at the front entrance. Dr. Escara had let him in through the service door, which told me the 2 men had spoken, or at least that Escara had been called ahead and had decided without hesitation what kind of access to give. The Commendatore stood at the dispensing counter with the 4 binders open in front of him. Mara at his left with the tablet, both of them working through the documentation, with the focused quiet of people who had spent the earlier part of the morning preparing to see exactly what they were now looking at. He was taller than the phone call had suggested. Not that voices have height, but the register had implied a certain contained economy that the physical presence confirmed. Dark suit, no tie. The kind of stillness that didn't come from training. It came from having made decisions for long enough that urgency no longer altered your posture. He looked up when I came through the service door. His eyes ran the practical assessment. Not appraising, not social. Calibrating. The same look he was giving the binders. Miss Ferris, he said. Sir, I said. He turned back to the binders. Sit down. I sat on the stool behind the dispensing counter. My stool, the one I used during queue lulls when my feet needed a rest from the non-slip shoes. The familiarity of it steadied something. Devrek has filed 2 things since yesterday afternoon, he said without looking up from the binder. A clean compliance report on this pharmacy, time-stamped 9:17 a.m. yesterday, and a district-level personnel flag on your employee file, citing inventory irregularities, preliminary only, no formal charge yet. Filed at 4:52 p.m. 1 hour and 11 minutes after Mara had left the pharmacy. He knew she'd been here, I said. He has a contact in the building facilities team, Mara said, not looking up from the tablet. We identified it this morning. A part-time maintenance worker who monitors access logs for him. We've suspended the worker's access as of 6 a.m. The Commendatore closed the first binder and opened the second. The personnel flag is designed to move faster than a formal investigation. If it escalates to a district personnel board before the evidence is formally submitted, your employment status becomes contested while the process runs, which takes 12 to 16 weeks. 12 to 16 weeks. The surgical slot closed in 6. He's trying to neutralize me before the evidence can be submitted formally, I said. Yes. He looked up from the binder, directly. He's done this before. The room held that. There was a lab technician in District 4 18 months ago, Mara said. Discrepancy reported. Personnel flag filed within 48 hours. The technician's employment was suspended pending review. The formal investigation found nothing attributable, but the technician had resigned by week 3 of the suspension process. And Devrek's diversion in District 4? Dr. Escara said from the doorway to the patient corridor. Unresolved. Closed for insufficient evidence. Mara's voice was level, factual. The primary witness had resigned. I looked at the binders, at the photographed pages, the tabbed entries, the 22 forged initials, at the yellow preservation receipt sitting in my canvas bag, at the scratch on the cabinet lock and the secured footage and the time-stamped badge records. What do you need from me? I said to the Commendatore. He looked at me for a moment. The calibrating look, steady and entirely without theater. Your written statement, he said. Full timeline. Everything you found and when you found it, in your own words, signed and dated. He paused. And I need you to come to the Caserna Street office Monday morning. I have the 7:15 a.m. shift. Dr. Escara will cover the opening. He glanced at Escara, who nodded once without being asked to confirm. Then he looked back at me. 9 a.m. Bring everything you have. He closed the second binder and moved to the third. The pharmacy's fluorescent hum held steady above us, and outside the front shutters the Friday morning was beginning. The first patients arriving at the door, breath clouding in the February air, a city moving through its routines in full ignorance of what was sitting at the dispensing counter of District 9 Veltran Pharma on a Friday before opening. I pulled a fresh sheet from the prescription notepad, uncapped a pen, and started writing. I wrote for 40 minutes. The statement covered 4 pages of prescription notepad paper. My handwriting, the compressed F of Ferris that Devrek had studied and replicated, now signing its own account of what had been done in its name. I wrote in order. The morning count, the 9-unit discrepancy, the forged initials, the scratch, Devrek's unscheduled visit, the Verano Holdings preservation hold, the log audit, the 22 entries, the badge records, the phone call with the facilities manager, the carbon receipt. Every timestamp I could confirm with a document or photograph. When I finished, I signed the last page in full, Natalia Ferris, February 7th, and dated each page in the upper right corner. Mara collected the pages without reading them in front of me, which told me she would read them carefully later, in sequence, against the documentation already on her tablet. The Commendatore had finished the third binder and was partway through the fourth when the first patient knocked at the front shutters at 8:03. He closed the binder without hurry and looked at Dr. Escara. You'll open in 5 minutes. Escara nodded. He looked at me. Monday, 9 a.m. Yes, I said. He picked up the 4 binders, all 4 stacked cleanly, held at his side with the ease of someone accustomed to carrying weight without signaling effort, and walked to the service door with Mara a half step behind. At the door he stopped without turning. The personnel flag Devrek filed, he said. It will be responded to before end of business today. You won't be suspended. A pause. Continue your shift. Then he was through the door, and it swung shut behind him, and the service alley received them both. And the pharmacy was simply the pharmacy again. Fluorescent hum, dispensing counter, the patient at the front shutter still waiting politely in the February cold. Dr. Escara opened the shutters at 8:08. I was at the counter. Friday, February 7th, afternoon. At 2:47 p.m., a district-level email arrived on the pharmacy's administrative terminal, copied to Dr. Escara and to my employee file. I read it over Escara's shoulder. The personnel flag filed at 4:52 p.m. the previous day had been reviewed and formally suspended pending a counter-investigation initiated by Verano Holdings Property Management in cooperation with the Regional Pharmaceutical Oversight Board. All personnel actions against Natalia Ferris, dispensing staff, District 9 Veltran Pharma, were stayed indefinitely. The counter-investigation reference number was printed at the bottom in bold. Below that, a secondary notice from the regional board confirming receipt of documented evidence, controlled substance log discrepancies, forged staff entries, CCTV footage under preservation hold, and initiating a formal inquiry into District 9 compliance records dating from October. Devrek's name did not appear in either notice. It didn't need to. The reference numbers were a trail, and the trail led to one place. Dr. Escara read it twice. Then he looked at the front window, the gray street, the patients coming and going, the ordinary machinery of a Friday afternoon. He moved faster than I expected, he said. He was ready to move, I said. He was waiting to see if the evidence was real. Escara looked at me. He believed you on the phone call. He believed the documentation. I pulled the afternoon refill queue toward me. I just described it accurately. At 4:15, Mara called my personal cell. I took it in the back office. Devrek was notified of the counter-investigation at 3:30 p.m., she said. He has until Monday to respond through District Council. His master override key has been administratively suspended across all Verano Holdings properties effective immediately. Building facilities access revoked. His contact in the maintenance staff, I said. Referred to HR. Separate process. A pause. You did well. The statement is thorough. I held the phone and looked at the back office wall, the inspection schedule, the fire procedure card, the storeroom access log in its plastic sleeve, the ordinary texture of a room that had contained 11 months of careful invisible work. Is it enough? I said. The footage combined with the log audit and the badge records creates a complete chain, Mara said. The regional board will move on a formal disciplinary filing within 10 business days. Criminal referral is possible depending on the unit volume. Controlled substance diversion above a threshold triggers mandatory DEA notification. 22 entries, 4 months. Enough units diverted to fund a private rehabilitation facility for a teenage son whose fees appeared in a corporate wellness grant that no one had countersigned. Monday, she said. Don't be late. I was not late. Monday, February 10th, 8:58 a.m. The Caserna Street office was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled of marble and recycled air, and the particular quiet of institutional money. The elevator opened onto a reception area with 2 chairs, and a woman who had expected me and showed me through without asking my name. The office was large and uncluttered. Desk, 2 chairs, a window facing east over the financial district. The Commendatore was standing at the window when I entered, hands behind his back, looking at the street below with the stillness that I was beginning to understand was not distance. It was attention directed inward, the way a man looks at a problem he is in the process of solving. He turned when I came in. Sit down, he said. I sat. He sat across from me, not behind the desk, but in the second chair, which put us at the same level, which I understood was deliberate without needing to analyze it. Devrek's district council filed a response this morning, he said. They're citing procedural irregularities in the footage chain of custody. He set a single sheet on the knee-level table between our chairs. This is their argument. I read it. 3 paragraphs. The footage had been flagged and transferred at the request of a non-supervisory staff member, me, without authorization from either the pharmacy's district office or Veltran's regional compliance team. They argued the chain of custody was contaminated by unauthorized initiation. I looked up. The preservation hold was initiated under standard tenant rights protocol, I said. Any tenant or tenant staff member can request preservation of footage captured within a leased premises under Section 4.2 of the Verano Holdings lease agreement. I'm listed as a keyholder on the pharmacy's facilities record. I signed the keyholder form on my first day. He looked at me. The calibrating stillness. "I know," he said. "I wanted to hear you say it." He picked up the sheet and set it face down. "The chain of custody holds. Devrek's counsel will know that within the hour." He paused. "The regional board meets Thursday. You'll give your statement in person." "All right," I said. Outside the east window, the financial district moved through its Monday morning. Taxis, briefcases, the ordinary forward motion of a city that did not know that 4 floors up a chain of custody was holding firm, and a man who had spent 4 months building a frame around an invisible pharmacy assistant had just run out of procedural room. "Miss Ferris," he said. I looked at him. "Devrek chose you because he believed you had no recourse." He said it plainly, without decoration. He was wrong about that. The sentence sat between us in the uncluttered office. Not comfort, not reassurance. A fact, stated by a man who dealt in facts, carrying the particular weight of being true. "Yes," I said. He was. Thursday, February 13th, 8:30 a.m. The Regional Pharmaceutical Oversight Board met in a building on Aldrin Avenue, gray stone, brass plaques, the kind of institutional weight that had been accumulating in the architecture since the 1940s. Mara met me in the lobby at 8:22 and walked me through security without stopping at the desk, which told me her clearance here was not new. The hearing room was smaller than I had expected. A long table, 7 board members on one side, a single chair on the other. A court reporter in the corner, fingers already on the keys. 2 observers from the regional DEA office seated along the left wall. Dark suits, lanyards, the particular stillness of federal presence. Devrek was not there. His counsel was a man in his 50s with the managed composure of a litigator who had sat in enough of these rooms to make the chair look like his own furniture. He did not look at me when I entered. The Commendatore sat along the right wall with Mara, behind and to the side of my chair. Not at the table, not counsel of record, but present in the room the way a fact is present. Without announcement, without requiring acknowledgement, simply undeniable. I sat in the single chair and placed my hands flat on the table and answered every question in the order it was asked. The board's lead examiner was a woman named Dr. Voss, late 50s, reading glasses on a chain, the precise diction of someone who wrote regulatory language for a living, and therefore treated every sentence as a potential evidentiary record. She walked me through the timeline methodically. Discovery of the discrepancy, the forged initials, the unscheduled visit, the log audit. I answered without embellishment. Dates, times, observable facts. The documentation spoke in parallel. Mara had submitted the full evidence package Tuesday, and each item appeared on the projector screen as I referenced it, time-stamped and labeled. Devrek's counsel interrupted twice. Both times Dr. Voss overruled with a single word and continued. At 10:17 a.m., she set her pen down and looked at me over her glasses. "Miss Ferris, the 22 forged entries span October through January. In your assessment, when did you first become aware that something was irregular?" I thought about the exact moment, the tray in both hands, the count that wouldn't resolve, the 30 seconds standing at the cabinet looking at numbers that should have aligned and didn't. 7:26 a.m. on February 4th, I said. When the physical count and the overnight log didn't reconcile. Not before that? No. The entries were designed to be consistent with my working pattern. They would only surface under a direct comparison of physical count against log entries, which I perform every morning, but which produces no flag unless the discrepancy exceeds the standard variance threshold. I paused. The forged entries were calibrated to stay below the threshold individually. The cumulative total only became visible in the full 4-month audit. Dr. Voss wrote something. Along the right wall, I did not look at him. I did not need to. His presence was already part of my peripheral awareness the way the fluorescent hum of the pharmacy was. Steady, present, not requiring direct attention to remain fully registered. At 10:44, the board excused me. The court reporter's keys stopped. Devrek's counsel was already speaking in a low tone to his associate before I had fully stood. Mara walked me out to the corridor. "You were precise," she said. "Dr. Voss responds to precision." "What happens now?" The board deliberates. Given the DEA presence, they're likely moving to a formal disciplinary filing this week, not waiting the full 10 business days. Devrek's counsel knows it. We were at the elevator. She pressed the call button and looked at her tablet, already moving into the next task. "Mara," I said. She looked up. "The District 4 technician," I said. "The one who resigned." A pause. "Yes." "Is there a way to reopen it? The evidence from this case? The footage methodology? The key access pattern? It's the same operational signature." She looked at me for a moment, not surprised, evaluating. "That would require a separate filing. A third party would need to submit the connection." "Could it be submitted through Verano Holdings?" "Yes," she said. "It could." She looked back at her tablet. "I'll note it." The elevator arrived. I stepped in. The doors began to close, and then a hand came through the gap, not stopping the doors, just pressing the hold button from the outside, and the Commendatore stepped in. The doors closed. The elevator was small. He stood to my left, the correct professional distance, looking at the floor indicator above the doors. "The DEA observers," I said. "They weren't there for the board." "No," he said. "They were there because the unit volume across 4 months clears the federal diversion threshold." He paused. "They'll open their own file. Separate from the board. Parallel." The elevator moved. "Which means Devrek's counsel is now managing 2 simultaneous processes instead of 1. I looked at the floor indicator. 3, 2. "He'll try to negotiate," I said. "Offer cooperation on the DEA file in exchange for board leniency. He'll try." The elevator stopped. Ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby, the security desk, the brass plaques, the gray stone weight of Thursday morning. He did not move immediately. 1 beat, 2, the lobby sounds arriving from outside. "You argued the chain of custody on site," he said. "In my office Monday. Section 4.2, keyholder record. You had it ready." "I looked it up Saturday," I said, "after Mara's call Friday." He looked at me then, directly, the full attention of it, the calibrating focus that I had stopped finding impersonal because it was not impersonal. It was the way he looked at things he was deciding to trust. "Good," he said. He stepped out of the elevator. I followed, and we crossed the marble lobby toward the Aldrin Avenue exit. And the February light came through the glass doors in pale, flat sheets, and neither of us said anything further, and the silence between us had the quality of something that had earned itself, rather than arrived by default. The Aldrin Avenue exit opened onto a sidewalk still carrying Thursday's cold, pale sun, no wind, the kind of February morning that looked warmer than it was through glass. He stopped on the top step. The gray Fleet sedan was at the curb, engine off, but he made no move toward it. "Have you eaten?" he said. "No," I said. It was 11:02 a.m., and I had left the apartment at 7:45 with coffee and nothing else. He descended the steps and turned left along Aldrin. I fell into step beside him without being asked, which felt natural in the way only correct things feel natural. Not comfortable exactly, but right. Half a block to a place with a dark wood facade and the smell of espresso reaching the sidewalk. He held the door. Small tables, the low sound of the city filtered through glass, pastries under a dome. He ordered 2 coffees and carried them to a corner table without consulting me, which I did not mind because what he had chosen, black coffee, a small almond pastry, was what I would have chosen for myself. He sat. I sat. "The District 4 technician," he said. "Mara said she'd note it." She told me in the lobby. He wrapped both hands around his coffee. I should have connected it sooner. I knew Devrek's name from that file. I closed it. Insufficient evidence. Technician resigned. Chain broke. A pause. That was a mistake. No apology framing. No mitigation. A fact about a decision that had cost something. He would have found someone else, I said. He needed invisible people. Yes. His eyes were on the street. He was very good at finding them. Was, past tense, deliberate. Outside, a tram moved along Aldrin's center track, its bell a flat note in the cold. The coffee cooled at the edges. The pastry was almost gone. He reached into his coat and set a document on the table, folded thirds, the Regional Pharmaceutical Oversight Board's letterhead at the top. Mara flagged page 7 of the Employee Rights Addendum. It was in the board packet Tuesday. I unfolded it. Section 11.7, Mandatory Remediation for Targeted Employees. Formal finding of wrongful workplace conduct against a named staff member triggers a remediation payment through the district's staff fund. Amount set by the board based on duration and documented impact. Minimum threshold, $4,000. I read it twice. I didn't know this provision existed, I said. It's in the addendum from day one. A pause. It applies only if the finding names you specifically, which it will. The amount isn't guaranteed, I said. No. But 4 months of documentation establishes duration and impact both. I folded the page into my bag. Your HR file listed next of kin, he said. Mara flagged it. The deposit, I said. What the record showed. We're within range, I said. By how much? A pause. 3,200. He nodded once, set his cup down. No projection, no assurance. Just the nod of a man who had verified what the system contained and was letting it run. He stood and finished the last of the coffee while the tram bell sounded again in the street outside. He left the tip on the table in cash. Exact. No calculation visible. And held the door on the way out, the same way he had held it on the way in. Not performance. Habit. The code expressed in small, consistent actions rather than stated principles. We walked back along Aldrin toward the sedan. The cold was sharper moving than it had been standing, the pale sun doing nothing useful against the February air. At the curb, he stopped. Mara was already at the driver's door, tablet under her arm, the organized readiness of someone who had spent the coffee interval working. One more thing, he said, not looking at me yet. His eyes were on the building we had just left, the gray stone, the brass plaques, the 4th floor window where the board was still in deliberation. Devrek's son. I waited. Private rehabilitation facility on the north end. Fees covered through a Veltran corporate wellness grant, approved through district, Devrek's own approval chain. He looked at me now. The grant is real. He redirected diversion proceeds into a legitimate fund and used it to pay fees that were always going to be paid regardless. It was the cleanest part of the operation. He needed the money to pre-exist as legitimate, I said, so the son's care couldn't be traced back to the diversion. Yes. A pause. The son is 17. He'll stay in the facility regardless of what happens to Devrek. The fund has 18 months remaining, administered independently. He said it without being asked, which meant he had anticipated the question. The DEA will ask about motive. Answer within what you can document. I noted the grant reference in a break room newsletter, I said. And the unsigned countersignature. Both are in my written statement. That's all you need. He opened the sedan's rear door. Monday. Mara sends the District 4 comparative file. Review it before the interview. Understood. He paused at the door. The specific pause of a man who had said what was necessary and was deciding whether something else was also necessary. You live on the north end, he said. Veltran and Marsh, I said. 11 months. The bus shelter there has a broken panel. I looked at him. Yes. I know the building owner, he said. He's been slow. The faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, not one. I'll mention it. Then he was in the sedan, and Mara pulled cleanly from the curb, and the vehicle moved into the Aldrin Avenue current and became just another dark car in Thursday morning traffic. I took the bus home. The North End route ran along the river for 6 blocks before turning inland, and I sat at the window with the folded page from my canvas bag open on my knee. Section 11.7, the minimum threshold line, the board discretion clause I had read twice at the coffee table and was now reading a third time on a moving bus because I needed to be certain I had understood it correctly and not filled in what I wanted it to say. I had understood it correctly. I did the arithmetic on my phone's notepad. The current amount we had, plus $4,000 minimum remediation if the board found in my favor, which the 4 months of documentation made probable without being guaranteed. The total cleared the deposit by $800 at minimum threshold. More if the board applied the duration scale in section 11.7's second paragraph. $800 of margin. After 11 months of 7:15 arrivals, and careful counting, and a single morning of being the right kind of invisible, I folded the page back into my bag, put my phone away, watched the river, February gray, flat, the far bank barely visible through haze, the kind of view that required nothing, which was what I needed. The provision had been in the addendum on my first day, with the fire procedure card and the inspection schedule. I had filed the addendum without reading past page 3. That was worth knowing about myself. At home, Tomas was at the kitchen table with his physical therapy sheet, the daily exercise log the university hospital had given him in November, filled out with the conscientiousness of someone who understood that the difference between the surgical slot and the alternative was measured in the consistency of these small recorded efforts. He looked up when I came in. How was the meeting? I hung up my coat, sat across from him, set the folded page on the table between us. Read page 7, I said. He read it, once, then again, the second time slower, finger on the minimum threshold line. This is yours, he said. The board issues the formal finding next week. 4 months of documentation. It names me specifically. I looked at the exercise log. Neat columns, every day completed, no gaps since October. Book the slot Monday. He looked at the page. At me. The sharp-edged eyes that went soft only when he was deciding to trust something he had been afraid to trust. They went soft now. Not with relief, which would have been smaller, but with something that had been braced against a long wait, and was only now, carefully, beginning to set it down. Yeah, he said. Yeah. He picked up his pen, made a small mark in the Friday column. Okay, he said. The word carrying everything it needed to carry and nothing extra. Outside the kitchen window, the North End afternoon moved through its ordinary rhythms. The broken shelter panel was still broken. For now. I made coffee and let the day settle, and thought about a provision that had been on page 7 since day 1, and a chain of custody that held, and proof assembled in a morning, by a person who had spent 11 months learning to see what was almost right, but wasn't quite. Friday, February 14th. The board's formal finding arrived at 4:22 p.m., not by district email this time, but by certified letter to the pharmacy's registered address, copied to my personal address, the envelope thick with the weight of official process finally moving in the right direction. Dr. Escara opened it at the dispensing counter after the last patient had gone. He read it once, set it flat, and read it again. Formal finding. Controlled substance diversion via unauthorized use of staff credentials, 4 counts, totaling 22 documented entries. Responsible party, Silas Devrek, District Compliance Supervisor, Veltran Pharma Group. Finding of wrongful workplace conduct against targeted employee Natalia Ferris, Dispensing Staff, District 9. Mandatory remediation payment under Regional Pharmaceutical Oversight Code Section 11.7, $6,200, to be processed within 10 business days through the district's staff remediation fund. $6,200, not $4,000 minimum. $6,200. I read the number 3 times. Natalia, Dr. Escara said. I looked up. He was looking at me with the full attention expression, the rare one. Congratulations, he said. Quiet, without ceremony, which was the right register for it. I folded the letter back into the envelope. Thank you for not calling district on February 4th, I said. He waved one hand, a small dismissal, the gesture of a man who had simply done what the situation required. You told me not to, he said, and went to lock the Schedule 2 cabinet for the night. I called Thomas from the bus. He didn't speak for a moment when I gave him the number. I could hear the kitchen, the faint sound of the television, a chair shifting. 6,000, he said. 6,200, I said. Another pause. Nat. Book the slot Monday, I said. First thing. Yeah. His voice had the particular thickness of a 19-year-old who had been holding something very carefully for a very long time and was only now setting it down completely. Yeah, okay. I rode the rest of the way home with the envelope in my canvas bag, and the river moving gray and flat below the bridge, and the North End lights coming on one by one in the February dusk. And I felt the specific quiet of a thing resolved. Not loud, not sudden, but settling like a weight redistributed after months of being carried wrong. Monday, February 17th. The remediation payment cleared at 9:14 a.m. Mara sent me the transfer confirmation at 9:16, a single message, no commentary, the confirmation number and timestamp and amount in clean text. Proof item 6. Tomas had called the university hospital at 8:30. The deposit was secured at 10:47 a.m. Dr. Reinhold's surgical slot, March 22nd, confirmed. I was at the dispensing counter when the confirmation came through on my phone. I read it twice, locked the screen, and dispensed Mrs. Calloway's metformin refill with the same measured efficiency I had used every morning for 11 months. She thanked me, said I always seemed calm, said it must be a gift. Practice, I said. Wednesday, February 19th. Devrek's small victory arrived the way small victories from cornered men always arrive, sideways, through a channel too indirect to trace cleanly. A post appeared on the Veltran District Pharmacist Network forum. An anonymous account, created February 18th, one post only. It described a dispensing staff member at District 9 who had fabricated inventory records to trigger a compliance complaint against a supervisor she had a personal dispute with. The post named no names. It didn't need to. The details, pharmacy district, staff seniority, controlled substance log, identified me to anyone who knew the district. Mara forwarded it to me at 11:03 a.m. with a single line. Noted. Account origin traced to a public terminal at the district office building on Guerin Street. Screenshot preserved. Proof item 7. I read the post once. Closed it. Processed the 11:15 queue. The post was not nothing. Dr. Escara showed me 2 emails that afternoon from peer pharmacists in adjacent districts asking careful questions. The professional courtesy kind that meant the rumor had reached them, and they were choosing the most collegial way to inquire. He answered both with a brief factual summary. The board finding was on record. The staff member had been formally cleared. The matter was under active DEA review. Both pharmacists replied within the hour. Apologies for asking. Of course. But the forum post would stay in circulation regardless of the replies. The internet had its own half-life for these things, the original claim outlasting the correction, the damage accumulating in the gap. Devrek knew this. He had paid $3,000 to a Phoenix reputation firm in the story I was not in. This was his version. Cheaper, less traceable, calibrated to the professional network rather than the public one. He was losing every formal track, and he knew it. This was the only terrain he had left. The informal, the social, the corridor conversation between colleagues that never appeared in board findings or DEA files. It was not nothing. And it was not enough. Thursday, February 20th. The Commendatore called at 8:45 a.m., not Mara, him directly, which was uncommon enough to make me straighten slightly at the dispensing counter before I caught myself. The DEA interview, he said. March 3rd. Federal building on Caserna. Mara will accompany you. A pause. The Forum Post. I saw it. Devrek filed it from the district office terminal, he said, which is a violation of his administrative suspension terms. Mara has added it to the board's supplementary file. It will be used in the DEA interview as evidence of ongoing intimidation post-finding. His counsel won't be happy, I said. His counsel has already called twice this week, requesting a settlement meeting. A pause, the quality of it shifting slightly, a fraction of weight added. I declined. All right? Miss Ferris. His voice, level as always, carrying the thing underneath it that I had learned to hear not in volume, but in the precise economy of what he chose to say. The Forum Post. Don't let it sit with you. I looked at the dispensing counter, the binders, the label printer, the Schedule 2 cabinet with its new lock fitted last week by Verano's maintenance crew, no scratch on the keyhole housing. It won't, I said, and meant it. Good. A pause. Doctor, Escara tells me you reorganize the counter before the queue every morning. He mentioned that? He said you've done it since week 1. Another pause. The not-quite-smile register, the one I had heard once on the Aldrin Avenue curb. The counter was already organized. Not to the standard required for an efficient queue, I said. A beat. No, he said. I don't imagine it was. The line ended. I set my phone in my coat pocket and turned to face the front door where the first patient of the Thursday morning was already at the glass, breath fogging, waiting with the ordinary patience of someone who needed their prescription and trusted that the counter would be ready when the shutters opened. I opened the shutters at 8:59. Monday, March 3rd, 8:47 a.m. The federal building on Caserna Street was nothing like the board's gray stone on Aldrin. It was newer, glass and steel, the kind of architecture that communicated efficiency rather than permanence. Function visible in every line of it. No accumulated weight in the walls, just the clean authority of a building that processed things and moved on. Mara met me at the security checkpoint at 8:40. She had the comparative District 4 file under her arm, the one she had prepared after my corridor comment outside the elevator. 46 pages of log comparisons, operational signature analysis, and badge access cross-references between District 4 and District 9. She had sent it to me Monday the previous week, and I had read it twice on the bus, once at the kitchen table with Tomas asleep, annotating in pencil the 8 points where the method signatures were identical, down to the forged initial pressure and ink weight. I had returned it to her with the annotations. She had incorporated them without comment, which I had taken as confirmation they were correct. The DEA interview room was on the 3rd floor, smaller than the board's hearing room, no long table. 4 chairs arranged in a square, a recording device at the center, 2 special agents and a supervising analyst. Agent Farrow ran the session, mid-40s, the specific patience of a federal investigator who had learned that precision mattered more than speed. Her partner, Agent Coles, operated the recorder and asked secondary questions. The supervising analyst, whose name I did not catch, sat with a laptop and did not look up from it for the first 20 minutes. Miss Ferris, Farrow said, walk us through February 4th from the beginning. I walked them through it. The same chronology I had given the board, the same language, the same observable facts in the same order, because the facts had not changed, and precision required consistency. Farrow let me complete each section without interruption. Coles noted timestamps. The recorder's red light held steady. At 9:34, Farrow set down her pen and looked at the comparative file Mara had placed on the chair between them. The District 4 Operational Analysis. You initiated this? I raised the connection, I said. Mara compiled the file. The 8 annotated points are mine. Farrow looked at Mara. Mara confirmed with a nod. Point 4, Farrow said. The forged initial pressure and ink weight. You identified this from direct observation of the original log entries? I handle the log daily, I said. My own entries are lighter on the F, a compression habit. The forged entries applied more pressure, which is consistent with someone replicating from memory rather than from trained muscle response. The District 4 log copies in your file show the same pattern, same pressure overage on the replicated initials. Farrow looked at Coles. Something passed between them. Not surprise, the thing that comes after surprise when confirmation arrives where it was expected. The District 4 staff member who resigned, I said. Her name is in the file. She's reachable. She's already been contacted, Farrow said. Last week. She picked up her pen. Because of your annotation. The session continued for another 40 minutes. Farrow moved through the diversion timeline methodically. Unit volumes per entry, estimated street value, the wellness grant redirection through the district approval chain. The supervising analyst began looking up from his laptop around the 30-minute mark, which I took as a signal that the numbers were resolving into a federal threshold determination rather than a preliminary inquiry. At 10:44, Farrow closed her folder. One final area, the forum post. February 19th, Veltran District Network. I saw it the morning Mara forwarded it, I said. You didn't respond to it. No. Why not? Because responding would have given it more circulation than it had earned, I said. And because the board finding was already on record. The post was designed to move in the gap between the formal record and the professional network. Engaging it directly would have widened the gap. Farrow looked at me for a moment. The same quality of attention Dr. Voss had used when I cited the chain of custody provision. Precision registering. The post has been logged as evidence of post-suspension intimidation, she said. It will be included in the federal filing. She looked at her notes. Mr. Devrek's counsel contacted our office Friday requesting a cooperation arrangement, information on distribution networks in exchange for reduced federal exposure. The room held that. He has distribution network contacts? Mara said. Her voice was level, but the question was sharp. He claims to, Farrow said. We're assessing credibility. She looked at me. If the cooperation arrangement proceeds, his federal exposure is reduced, not eliminated. The board finding stands regardless. Your remediation payment and cleared employment record are not affected by any federal arrangement. I understand, I said. The arrangement may delay the federal timeline, she said. Weeks, possibly months. I want you to hear that directly rather than through the process. I looked at the recording device, the red light still steady, the session still running. Is that on record? I said. Farrow looked at the device. The faintest acknowledgement moved through her expression, not a smile, the federal equivalent of one. Yes, she said. Then I have no objection to the arrangement, I said. Provided the board finding and employment record stand. They stand, she said. She reached forward and stopped the recording. The red light went out. Mara and I rode the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, the morning security queue had lengthened. A line of visitors at the checkpoint, the specific patient shuffling of people waiting to be processed by a building that processed things methodically and without apology. He's going to cooperate, Mara said, not looking at me. Whatever he knows about the distribution chain, he'll give it. It's the only leverage he has left. Will it work? Partially. She held the door to the street. Enough to reduce the sentence. Not enough to remove it. Outside, the Caserna Street morning was cold and clear, the kind of February day that had stopped pretending to be anything other than winter. The federal building's glass exterior reflected the sky in flat gray panels, efficient and impersonal, already moving on. "Mara," I said. She looked up from her tablet. "The District 4 technician. Is she all right?" A pause. "She's working at a clinic on the south side," she said. "She'll give a statement next week." Another pause. Something in it that was not quite professional neutrality. She said she'd been waiting 18 months for someone to call. We walked back along Caserna toward the sedan. The cold came off the glass buildings in flat sheets. Not wind, just the ambient chill of a street built for efficiency rather than shelter. My canvas bag knocked against my hip in its familiar rhythm, lighter than usual without the binders and photographs that had lived in it for the past 3 weeks. At the sedan, Mara stopped and looked at her phone. Her expression shifted, controlled, but I had learned the difference between her neutral and her contained by now. "What?" I said. "Devrek's counsel filed an emergency injunction this morning at 9:02 a.m. She turned the phone toward me. "Requesting a stay on the board's formal filing pending the federal cooperation arrangement. Argued that simultaneous federal and board proceedings create double jeopardy exposure. 9:02 a.m. While I was on the 3rd floor walking Agent Farrow through February 4th. While the recorder's red light held steady, and the supervising analyst's laptop filled with federal threshold numbers. "It won't hold," I said. "No," Mara said. "But it creates a procedural delay, potentially 2 weeks while the board responds. Devrek's counsel knows the board won't like the argument. He's not trying to win it. He's trying to buy time." Time. The surgical slot was March 22nd, 19 days out. The delay didn't touch the deposit, which had cleared. Tomas's slot was secure. But the injunction meant Devrek's formal filing would hang unresolved for another 2 weeks, which meant his employment status remained technically contested, which meant his access to the district network, the forum, the professional channels, was still technically active while the board processed its response. 2 more weeks of the forum post's half-life. 2 more weeks of the gap between formal record and professional corridor. "He's going to use the window," I said. "Yes," Mara said. "We expect another forum post or a direct contact to district-adjacent colleagues." She put her phone away. "We're monitoring." I looked at the federal building's glass face, the sky reflected in flat gray panels, the security queue still moving in its patient shuffle inside the lobby. 8 proof items assembled across 3 weeks. A chain of custody that had held against 2 legal challenges. A DEA file open and running. A District 4 technician waiting 18 months for a phone call that had finally come because I had made a corridor comment outside an elevator. 2 weeks of procedural delay was not nothing. It was also not enough to change what had already been built. "Tell me when the next post goes up," I said. Mara looked at me. "Why?" "Because I want to know the exact moment he uses his last move," I said. "So I know when he has nothing left." She studied me for a moment, with the evaluating look, the one she used when she was deciding whether something was emotional or operational. She appeared to conclude it was the latter. "I'll send it immediately," she said, and opened the sedan door. I took the bus. 40 minutes north along the river, the pale February sun doing its inadequate best against the glass, Caserna Street receding behind me block by block until the financial district gave way to the mid-city grid, and then to the North End's familiar rhythms, the corner salt bin, the insurance office with its perpetual ice patch, the broken shelter panel at Veltran and Marsh, catching the afternoon wind at its specific angle. I got off at my stop and stood for a moment in the shelter. The wind coming through the broken panel exactly as it always did, cold against the back of my neck exactly as it always did. 19 days to March 22nd. I put my head down and walked. Friday, March 7th, 11:14 a.m. The forum post went up at 11:09 a.m. Mara's message arrived 5 minutes later. Screenshot, timestamp, account origin still being traced. This one named me, not obliquely, full name. Natalia Ferris, District 9, Veltran Pharma, fabricated controlled substance records to target a supervisor after a personal dispute. Board finding obtained through falsified documentation submitted by a building management company with a financial interest in the outcome. I read it at the dispensing counter. Set my phone face down. Processed 2 refill requests, then picked it up and read it again. The building management company line was the intelligent part. The one angle that could make the chain of custody look politically contaminated to a professional audience that didn't know the lease structure. Most people would see financial interest and file it under complicated, probably political, and disengage, which was all it needed to do. Not destroy, just cloud. He was losing every formal track and he knew it. This was the last terrain he had left. The professional corridor, the informal network, the gap where board findings didn't reach, and formal clearances didn't circulate unless someone went looking. It was not his most dangerous move. It was his most honest one. At 1:47 p.m., the pharmacy's back line rang. Dr. Escara was with a patient. I answered. "Miss Ferris." Devrek's voice. The clipped efficiency stripped of its compliance calibration now, rawer underneath. The voice of a man who had been managing his own unraveling for 3 weeks and was running low on management. "Mr. Devrek," I said. Even. "The injunction gives me 2 weeks," he said. "The board can't finalize while it's active. The federal arrangement is still open." A pause. Deliberate. Waited. "Your brother's surgery is March 22nd. The pharmacy's fluorescent hum. The label printer behind me. Mrs. Calloway's file open on the terminal. "Yes," I said. "Withdraw the District 4 connection from the DEA file," he said. "Just that section. The annotations, your annotations. Tell them you overstated the signature match. 1 paragraph. The federal arrangement proceeds, the board delay extends, and nothing touches your brother's slot." There it was. Clean, specific, targeted at the exact point of pressure he had found. $14,800, a surgical slot, a 19-year-old with careful movements and a daily exercise log, filled without gaps. He had studied the employment file and the insurance terminal record, and had built a lever out of what Mara had flagged as documentation. He had taken the proof of how well I was protected and turned it into the mechanism of his last threat. "No," I said. A silence. Then footsteps. The pharmacy's front door, which I had not heard open. I turned. Devrek was standing at the dispensing counter, phone still at his ear. The careful grooming gone. Shirt collar open, district lanyard missing for the first time in 11 months. His eyes moved to mine with the flat register of a man who had decided that physical presence would accomplish what distance hadn't, that closing the space between us would shift something in the calculation. 5 minutes, he said, lowering the phone. That's all. The pharmacy is open, I said. I need you to leave. He reached across the counter and closed his hand around my wrist. 1 beat, the grip tight, the pressure of it climbing my forearm, and the air left my lungs. Then Dr. Escara was in the doorway from the patient corridor, already moving, and Devrek released and stepped back, and the fluorescent light was very bright and very steady, and I set both hands flat on the dispensing counter and breathed. Escara did not touch him. He stood in the doorway and said, "Get out of this pharmacy," with the quiet of a man who understood that control of voice was control of room. Devrek looked at Escara, then at me. The flat register cracking at its edges now, not remorse. Desperation wearing remorse as a mask, which is a different thing and more dangerous because it still calculates. "I need 1 paragraph," he said. 1. "You've just made physical contact with a staff member inside a leased premises during an active administrative suspension," I said. The dispensing corridor camera captured it. Chain of custody runs through Verano Holdings, not through you. He looked at the camera above the counter. The same camera that had captured him here at 18:31 on a Thursday in October. Master override key in the lock. my initials going into the log in borrowed ink. The same system that had already broken his first procedural defense and his second. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he had believed was manageable and had watched become, over the course of 3 weeks, the architecture of his own dismantling. He left. I flagged the segment immediately. Dispensing counter, 1:47 p.m. to 1:54 p.m. Preservation hold confirmed. Timestamp locked. Proof item 8. Mara arrived at 2:31. Watched the segment twice without expression. Made a call from the back office. 3 minutes. Low voice. The specific brevity of a message to someone who had been waiting for it. She came out at 2:36. He's still in the building. Gray sedan. Loading zone. Engine off. I looked at the front window. He's waiting, she said, to see if you file the physical contact formally. If you do, his counsel argues mutual escalation. Claims the wrist grip was a response to your verbal provocation. It muddies the administrative record without winning anything. Buys another procedural layer. She paused. If you don't file, he concludes you can be pressured into silence and escalates. A move that was simultaneously aggressive and calculated. Even cornered, still thinking in contingencies. File it, I said. At 3:04 p.m., a federal building officer arrived. Federal jurisdiction, active DEA file, which meant the incident report entered the federal record directly, not the district system, not a channel Devrek had any remaining access to. Devrek was brought inside, documented, released with a formal conduct violation notice under his administrative suspension terms. His counsel called Mara at 3:47. The federal cooperation arrangement was being reconsidered. What does that mean? I said. It means the wrist grip just became federal evidence, she said. His cooperation value to the DEA was contingent on clean conduct during the suspension. He's just contaminated it. She looked at her tablet. His counsel now has 2 choices. Push a contaminated cooperation arrangement with reduced leverage, or let the federal file run without cooperation and face the full exposure. A pause. Either way, Devrek's last negotiating asset is gone. He spent it on 5 minutes at your counter. The pharmacy's fluorescent hum, the label printer, the Schedule II cabinet with its new lock and clean keyhole. He came here because he'd run out of moves that worked from a distance, I said. Yes, Mara said, and now he's run out of the close ones too. She left at 4:15. Dr. Escara locked up at 5. I stayed until 5:30, restocked the label rolls, reorganized the refill queue for Monday, wiped down the dispensing counter the way I always did at the end of a Friday. The counter was already organized. It always was by the end of the shift. I organized it anyway. Escara did not touch him. He stood in the doorway with the full attention expression locked into something harder and said, "Get out of this pharmacy," with the quiet of a man who had spent 30 years managing dangerous substances and understood that control of voice was control of room. Devrek looked at Escara, then at me. The flat register cracking at the edges. Not remorse. Desperation wearing remorse as a mask, which is a different thing and still calculates. I need 1 paragraph, he said. 1. You've made physical contact with a staff member inside a leased premises during an active administrative suspension, I said. The dispensing corridor camera has it. Chain of custody runs through Verano Holdings, not through you. He looked at the camera above the counter, the same one that had captured him at 18:31 on a Thursday in October. Master override key in the lock, my initials going into the log in borrowed ink. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he had once believed was manageable and had watched become, across 3 weeks of formal filings and federal holds and a court reporter's steady keys, the full architecture of his own undoing. He left. I flagged the segment immediately, 1:47 to 1:54 p.m., preservation hold confirmed, timestamp locked. Proof item 8. Mara arrived at 2:31. Watched the segment twice without expression. Made a call from the back office. 3 minutes. the specific brevity of a message to someone who had been waiting for it. She came out at 2:36. He's still in the building. Gray sedan, loading zone. I looked at the front window. He's waiting to see if you file it formally, she said. If you do, his counsel argues mutual escalation, wrist grip as response to verbal provocation, muddies the administrative record. If you don't, he reads it as pressure working. She paused. But here's what his counsel doesn't know yet. The wrist grip is federal conduct. The DEA cooperation arrangement required clean suspension behavior. He just voided his own leverage, the last thing he had left to trade. A move that was aggressive and calculated, and still, in the end, wrong. Even cornered, he had thought 2 steps ahead. He just hadn't seen that both steps led to the same place. File it, I said. At 3:04, a federal building officer arrived. Devrek was brought in, documented, released with a formal conduct violation. His counsel called Mara at 3:47. The cooperation arrangement is being reconsidered, she said. Meaning? Meaning his counsel just read the federal conduct report and understood that every move Devrek made today destroyed the only defense he had left. She looked at her tablet. He has nothing to offer the DEA now. Nothing to trade, nothing to delay, nothing to contaminate. A pause. Before sunrise tomorrow, his counsel will tell him that begging for a reduced arrangement is the only door still open. And is it? I said. It's a very small door, she said. And it doesn't lead anywhere good. He called at 6:52 p.m. Not Mara. Him. Come to the office, he said. Now, Caserna Street. The Caserna Street building was quieter at evening, the security desk running on one staff member, the elevator arriving immediately, the 4th floor reception empty. The woman who had shown me through without asking my name was gone for the day. Mara was at the desk outside his office, coat still on, which meant she had arrived recently. She looked at me when I came through. Something in her expression that was not quite warning and not quite preparation, something between the two. She opened the office door. He was standing at the window again, the same position as the first morning, hands behind his back, the east-facing glass now showing the city's evening lights rather than its pale dawn. Devrek's counsel was in one of the chairs, briefcase on his knee, the managed composure fully depleted now, a man sitting in the remains of his own strategy. He had filed an emergency statement through the board at 5:15 p.m. I had not seen it yet. Mara had. The statement claimed the CCTV segment was ambiguous, that the figure at the dispensing counter could not be definitively identified as Silas Devrek, that the preservation hold had been initiated by a biased party, me, and therefore the chain of custody was again compromised. One last procedural move, filed with the desperation of a man who had watched every other door close. The Commendatore turned from the window. He looked at his counsel, then at me. His expression was the contained stillness I had learned to read. Not cold, not distant. Fully present, moving toward a decision. He crossed to the desk, opened a folder. The CCTV still printed, the dispensing counter, the figure at the counter, one hand across the surface, my wrist in its grip, timestamp 13:51:04. He set it flat on the desk between us and looked at me. Tell me his name, Natalia. Cold. Precise. A repetition of the question Devrek's counsel had argued could not be answered. Said now as a demand that would go on record in this room, with a court reporter Mara had arranged sitting quietly in the corner, whose keys I had not noticed until this moment. Silas Devrek, I said. District Compliance Supervisor, Veltran Pharma Group. He looked at Devrek's counsel, said nothing. The counsel's briefcase came off his knee and onto the floor, a small collapse, barely visible, the posture of a man standing down. The court reporter's keys stopped. The Commendatore closed the folder. Mara. She was already in the doorway. Board final order is ready for signature. Federal conduct report filed at 4:58 p.m. Both are on record. Proof item 9. Proof item 10. He signed the board order without sitting, standing at the desk, pen moving once, clean. Then he set the pen down and looked at the east window, the city laid out below in its ordinary evening lights, indifferent and continuous. At 4:47 a.m. the following morning, Mara's message arrived on my phone. Devrek's counsel contacted federal office requesting any available arrangement. Full cooperation offered. Signed statement. Before 5 a.m., before sunrise. I read it in the kitchen, Tomas still asleep, the north end quiet outside the window. The bus shelter at Veltran and Marsh stood in the orange streetlight glow. The broken panel replaced, the east side sealed, the wind with nowhere left to come through. The maintenance crew had come Thursday. Building owner had mentioned it. I made coffee and watched the city come forward into morning and thought about a man who had spent 4 months studying my initials and had not once looked at what was behind them. The 7:15 arrivals, the tray counts, the 46 pages of annotated log comparisons, the corridor comment outside an elevator that had found a woman waiting 18 months for a phone call. Invisible. Present. Still here. If Natalia's story stayed with you, if you felt something when she stood at that counter alone and refused to break, hit the like button. Subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss the next story. One question for the comments. When Devrek walked through that door, did you think Natalia would hold her ground? Tell me below. I read every single one.